Alright, everybody, how are we doing today? So, guys like Sargon and Stephen Molyneux, sure, they the alt-right sort of built a monolith out of the far-left extremists, the alt-left, as I like to call them. But that doesn't mean they don't exist, and they most certainly do. And this shit is just getting out of hand, and it's mostly on college campuses, go figure. Since a lot of these colleges are liberal colleges. And even more moderate liberals can be just as cognitively dissonant and as crazy as a lot of these extremists are. Extremism on the left is becoming more common. But this is from Rupley, or RT, and it says, I was a liberal NRI professor, but when I said the left was going too far, colleagues called me a Nazi and treated me like a Russian spy. Oh, you mean they gave you the Russian bot line? Yeah, that one's popular. I have not yet been called a Russian bot, but I have seen a few friends and colleagues on Twitter referred to as Russian bots before, so, you know. It's a thing. Don't even realize that Nazi doesn't just mean racist, but National Socialist Workers' Party. Just, you know, German. But anyway. What's wrong with the American left? Suffering from Trump anxiety disorder, acting like cult members, and engaging in a new McCarthyism. The left has lost its collective mind. I saw it coming and left the left in the nick of time. The funny thing is, they keep saying that it's the conservatives who are being McCarthyist anytime they criticize socialism at all. That one I have been witness to. I have been called a McCarthyist, even though literally when growing up, I was told by my father and grandmother that McCarthyism was a shit show. Not their words, of course, but... my break with the left began in the fall of 2016. I was a professor at New York University, a left liberal and an active social media participant. My skepticism and resentment of my political tribe's insistence that I affirm its increasingly crazy claims had been growing steadily to this point. Much like Jordan Peterson, my tipping point involved the pronoun wars. Although, as you'll see, I enjoyed a more satirical approach when the University of Michigan instituted a policy that offered students a carte blanche pronoun preference opportunity. A clever student offered his majesty as his chosen pronoun, and his blasphemous pronoun choice made the news. The satirical trope hilariously underscored the absurdity of gender and pronoun proliferation, and the institutional lunacy that has attempted to keep pace with it. I posted a link to an article about the proof on Facebook without comment. I then proceeded to teach for the rest of the afternoon. By the time I noticed the pandemonium, it was too late to manage it. A histrionic reaction had ensued. Hundreds upon hundreds of condemnatory threads and subthreads multiplied beneath the link. Dozens and dozens of Facebook friends had sent private messages demanding explanations and retractions. I was accused of betrayal, discursive violence, and transphobia. I soon became a defector from the party line, and the university would come down on me like a ton of bricks. The university simply capitulates mostly because they don't know what's going on. These sort of far-left, PC, politically correct policies are enforced by a sort of bully tactic. The alt-left, and indeed the alt-right, it's like a little gang war inside your computer or on the internet. It's like a gang war. People wanting to use militant tactics, authoritarian tactics to enforce political correctness, and another group which tries to enforce its First Amendment rights with the exact same tactics, which just makes them just as bad. I mean, I'm a former alt-righter. There's a lot of rumors about alt-right being super racist, far-right, like KKK types, but they're not. They're just a bunch of idiot bullies who think that the only answer to everything is to be a bully. Actually, they're a lot like Trump in that respect, because he too is quite the bully. That's part of the reason why I left the alt-right, is just because this sort of bullying and harassment is simply not the answer. But that's what these PC types will do to the colleges. They'll bully and harass the staff and the administrators until they get what they want. So, he goes on to say that the left's psychotic break. Clearly, a collective hysteria has the left in its grip. I am not using a strict definition of the left that includes only the hardcore Antifa members, socialists, and communists, but also refer to many people formerly known as liberals who've since become quite illiberal. Yes, because they don't actually respect individual freedoms, only the freedoms that they want. That makes them very illiberal indeed. I also include former moderate centrists who've become part of the resistance as an example of the latter. I point to an acquaintance I hadn't seen in years, someone I'd considered a milquetoast. Oh, milquetoast. Oh, okay. Milquetoast liberal at most, yet who now sounded like a radical leftist when remarking bitterly, I just wish someone would put a bullet through Donald Trump's head. Isn't it illegal to threaten the president's life? Should this person not be in prison right now? I think they should. Pretty sure that's illegal. I don't blame such foot soldiers for the resistance for their viciousness. They've been led to believe that they're morally superior to Trump and his followers, despite or perhaps because of the fact that they harbor such violent fantasies. They are not entirely responsible for their derangement. They are unwitting dupes being whipped into frenzies by the political and media establishments. They have contracted a contagious psychosis wherein, as one study puts it, certain unrealistic human behavior and thoughts can be transferred from one subject to another within the intimacy of the family circle, or according to an epidemic including numerous protagonists. Sounds about right. He just explained how it works in theory, which means that he's being honest here. He has an actual working theory as to how this could happen, which means he should be taken into consideration. Oh, sure, it's just an anecdote, but it's a well-founded anecdote. How many more anecdotes does it take before you take it seriously? Because this is not the first of its kind. In a court of law, they accept anecdotes. They call it witness testimony. You get enough anecdotes or witness testimony, and that's proof. Why don't we apply that here? But the American Psychological Association's, or APA, Dictionary of Psychology avoids terms like mass psychosis and contagious psychosis, like for the same reason that it avoids terms like nervous breakdown. They sound too dramatic and unscientific. But the APA does use the term collective hysteria, which its dictionary defines as the spontaneous outbreak of atypical thoughts, feelings, or actions in a group or social aggregate. Manifestations may include psychogenic illness, collective hallucinations, and bizarre actions. With its parade of successive delusions from the Russian collusion narrative to the Russian bots narrative, and the latest the Ukraine quid pro quo narrative, this seems to describe the contemporary left precisely. These narratives have in common a willful fabrication of crime stories believed to be true regardless of the lack of empirical evidence. I've been involved in those fights. That pretty much sounds like Brett Kavanaugh. Those who believe in these narratives merely repeat them ad nauseum in the hope that they'll become true, or at least that they'll be counted as true, which amounts to the same thing for the left, because for the left, beliefs equals or is greater than reality. So he goes on to say that, first off, talking about gender pluralism, the transgender movement has resulted in a seemingly endless parade of absurdities, including but not limited to the proliferation of genders and pronouns themselves, but also the claim that human sex differences is not an overwhelmingly binary system, because everything in their mind is relative. Everything's relative to them. Men can have periods too. Like, morality is relative, race is relative, sexuality is relative, politics are relative, everything's relative. They have no objective standard for anything. It's postmodernism at its finest. This last bit of transgender orthodoxy recently bled into mass media advertising thanks to the Feminine, not Women's Underwear Company. Thinks whose new menstruation ad made news it was rejected by CBS. So, CBS actually does have some brain. So CBS does have some brains. Add to these symptoms of mass hysteria the contagious tendency to label anything and everything racist, including shoes, sweaters, and stuffed animals. Commercial products deemed racist include the all-white Adidas sneakers, the Adidas shackle shoes, Gucci's blackface jumper, and Prada's monkey figure. And now they also go after the Dutch character Zwart Piet, which is not blackface. It is the depiction of your average European serf who probably goes down chimneys and he's got soot all over his face. But they turn that into racism, of course, because anything even vaguely resembling blackface suddenly becomes blackface to them. But the professor goes on to say, here's how the left and I parted ways. After my Facebook condemnation, I created an anonymous Twitter handle with the name The Deplorable NYU Prof, and began tweeting criticisms of political correctness and the adoption of social justice ideology in the university and beyond. I was soon discovered by a reporter from NYU student newspaper and decided to go on record for my views in an interview. I criticized the adoption of the new social justice creed by NYU and most other North American colleges and universities, including the establishment of bias reporting hotlines at NYU and at over 230 other institutions, the use of spaces, the adoption of trigger warnings, and the now routine no-platforming of speakers, which made it impossible for alternative perspectives to be heard on most campuses. Right, they turned the colleges into echo chambers. Now only one narrative is being heard. That is a major problem. But you know what else is a problem? I don't think trigger warnings are such a bad idea. Like, if you have a severe phobia of something and you haven't dealt with it, then you might want to put phobia trigger warnings for people who are phobic. Like, I'm phobic of spiders and snakes. There's spiders and snakes. That's probably a big deal. So they should probably put warnings on those, just in case. I think that is perfectly acceptable. Or if you are a veteran suffering from PTSD, then you can have a trigger warning. But if you're just some pathetic liberal snowflake, then sorry, no trigger warning for you. But yeah, they call him a Russian spy, Russian bot, etc., etc. All the typical shit you hear. He was called alt-right, Nazi, short pants, white devil, fragile white male, and Satan, among others. Satan, wow. Woo! Of course, from where I'm standing anymore, that's more of a compliment than an insult. But he goes on to say that, my life as a Russian spy. Upon complaining to Human Resource and Equal Opportunity Employment officers about the abuse, nothing happened except that my office was moved to, get this, the Russian department. I liked to joke that I was treated as if I were a Russian spy since my own personal gulag. I was transferred to a completely isolated office with bare metal shelves containing none of my books because the university refused to have them moved from my old office. I sued the university and 5 of the offending colleges for defamation. The university's army of lawyers made overcoming their motion to dismiss the suit nearly insurmountable for the small firm who had agreed to take my case on a contingency basis. The suit expired, but I later negotiated a retirement settlement with the university. Most people who hear my story do not wonder why I broke with the left when I did. They wonder why it took so long. To such people I say, consider the behavior and beliefs of the left and ask yourself how much indoctrination must have been necessary to produce such results. But consider this, I was subject to this very indoctrination for many years. My escape was a minor miracle. I agree. They were actually bringing in some of that social justice shit into the grade schools when I was a kid in school. But being the intellectual rebel that I am, I resisted basically all of it. So I consider that to be a minor miracle. Probably some parallel universe out there where I'm probably one of these far extreme leftists. Because they were trying to get it into the schools early. I think it started around 2008 or 2009. I started seeing a lot of the PC crap. The teachers were starting to push it. For crying out loud, they wouldn't even let us play fucking Hangman on the whiteboard because it wasn't politically correct. Like, seriously, it's just a fucking game. It's not like we're actually advocating for people being hung. That's... What? Yeah. Anyway, peace.